Hey everybody, Garrett, one more time for video number 4. Now in this one we're going to be talking about pipe design and how that can affect your experience. Now this is something I have thoroughly enjoyed experiencing hands on, but perhaps you don't want to take that avenue or just want to know more. That's what this is for. Now I've put together some notes once again, and I'm going to talk about some things, and that's pretty much it. There's not a whole bunch to show, but your pipe is essentially a small combustion engine, and the engineering that takes place there is based purely on the shape, the material, and the airflow that will dictate the temperature, speed, and chemistry of the way that it all burns. Now, as far as bowl geometry goes, the shape of the bowl is a primary factor in how the oxygen reaches the tobacco and how the flavors can concentrate. The chamber diameter, or like exposed surface area, for like wide bowls or pot shapes, authors, some of the authors, not all authors, have a wide bowl. The wider diameter creates a larger surface area for ember. This allows for more tobacco to burn simultaneously, producing a massive volume of smoke and opening up complex blends like English mixtures so that you can taste all of the components at once. However, because the ember is larger, it can easily get too hot if you puff too quickly. Also, because it is exposed to more air, it can go out quicker. Just something to consider. So that pipe will need a little more attention, but you're going to be getting a lot of those flavors all at once. Now, a cylindrical shape like the billiard or a standard poker, there are some larger pokers that can take on different aspects, but that tobacco will burn consistently, evenly, and smoothly from top to bottom. And then the flavor will be relatively stable, which is why a lot of people recommend a tall, narrow, cylindrical bowl for like Virginias to get the most enjoyment out of those. The Blockade Runner that I enjoy is, or have been enjoying, is a rum-soaked mixture of red and bright Virginias. It's very tangy, and in a taller cylindrical bowl, it is like sipping on that flavor. It is, you have lots of it to drink, and it is smooth and consistent throughout. Now, there's conical bowls like the Dublins, or I think some pickaxes might fall in that, cutties, things of that nature. As the tobacco burns down, the chamber is going to narrow and concentrate the burning ember and the smoke, causing the flavor to become significantly more intense and stronger at the bottom of the bowl. It's a dynamic smoking experience that can change as you move through the bowl. And there are some tobaccos in a conical bowl that are going to surprise you. I was never attracted to the Dublin shape, but at the urging of Mr. Jay Furman in direct conversation, I got my hands on a couple, and I have one that just, man, it never disappoints me. I can put anything in it, and I enjoy it so much. And that is my old German clay Dublin. Something to do with the age of the briar and the shape of it. It's also a more petite bowl, so I start to finish it a little bit faster than I would some of my larger bowls, and perhaps there's a little less monotony on the senses. I don't know how that weighs in, but that has been very enjoyable. But material also comes into play here. Now you have briar, which, sorry, my notes are very detailed here. So the materials will manage heat and thermal dynamics and water differently, or the hygroscopy of the material. A dry ember will burn cool. A wet ember creates steam, which can cause tongue bite. And aromatics are a primary culprit for that. And aromatics will drive people away from enjoying the pipe. So, something to consider. I'm trying to sit up. This chair just wants me to lay down. So briar is from the root burl of a heath tree and is extremely heat resistant and is a good insulator, meaning that it keeps heat inside the bowl, helping keep your ember alive. And that is very true and very important. You want to make sure that you're not re-burning things. So too hot of an ember will start to burn your tobacco really fast. It can sour certain flavors. It can also burn things prematurely, causing oils and whatnot to go from being slowly simmered in a flavor that you're going to enjoy to become something quite acrid. Just something to think about. Meerschaum is extremely porous and acts like a sponge. It will absorb the moisture and tars from the tobacco as it burns. This prevents the tobacco from steaming in its own juices, which is some of those oils that as it burns works its way down in the tobacco, which is some people don't enjoy the very last bit of their bowl because that has occurred. There are oils and things that work their way down, and the end of your bowl, if you're not managing it properly, starts to become the filter for the flavors that you're getting. And if some of those flavors that are building up become really gross, perhaps you've mismanaged that bowl. And that's something to be addressed not when you're a new smoker, but something to keep in mind as you experience it, that perhaps you could change something about what you're doing. Now, but Meerschaum does allow for pure flavor of the tobacco without the woody taste that briar sometimes adds, or the dusty taste, in my case. There are clay pipes that conduct a lot of heat. The bowl will become extremely hot, however, almost dangerously hot to touch as you smoke it. However, this is a benefit for the burn as the clay radiates heat away from the tobacco rapidly. This means the smoke entering your mouth is actually cooler than in many other types of pipes, provided you don't touch the bowl, which is why you'll see some of them with cord wrapped around or another piece on there where you can contact the clay without burning yourself. Another construction type or a category is the ventilator or corncob. These are naturally very porous and have a more open airway. They breathe incredibly well, allowing the heat to escape and fresh air to permeate the shank. This creates a forgiving burn that rarely gets too hot or sour, making them excellent for beginners. And that is important. You don't want to overheat it, and there are some tobacco flavors that only come out when they reach a certain temperature. And to play with that back and forth, there's nothing better than a cob. One of my first non-aromatic blends that I absolutely fell in love with, and I have shared with a lot of people, is Blue Ridge from Cornell and Diehl. That is one that it can be one flavor, and then if you speed up and start heating the tobacco up, the flavors can change. And it's not very oily tobacco, so if you slow back down, you can actually work your way back to that original flavor. It's one of very few where I've had that experience so consistently. One of the next aspects to talk about is airflow. So the draw, the internal engineering of the airway, the hole at the bottom that connects through the stem, acts as the carburetor. An open draw is if the airway is wide, common in cobs and high-end artisan pipes. The smoke is diluted with more air, cooling it down, so you don't have to pull so hard to get smoke, which encourages a relaxed, slow cadence, which is key, especially if you experience tongue bite, not being tongue-tied like I am right now. But also, for a smoother draw, you're also less likely to get plugs. And by plugs, I'm referring to when the leaf will plug off the airway as you're working through the bowl, and that can be really frustrating. Sometimes the shank, the piece of where it comes out of the bowl, is so long that even your traditional check tool, like this, you can't see it. That probably doesn't help either. But the poker on the check tool might not even be long enough to penetrate into the bowl to clear that. So that can be quite frustrating. And with a more open draw, that's less of a issue. You'll encounter that considerably less often. A restricted airway is either narrow or drilled poorly. If you feel resistance, this will subconsciously force you to pull harder and more frequently to get smoke. This is a bellows effect that stokes the ember, causing the tobacco to start to burn hotter and potentially destroying the more delicate flavors, which is very true. Now, something you need to keep in mind is if you're using a filter, that adds an additional restriction, and you have to remind yourself to slow down, to take little sips, as though you weren't seeing that restriction. It is a learned practice, and it will benefit you as you learn it if you're using a filter and experiencing that. But for some, especially those coming from like cigarettes or other things, that is a very hard habit to break. Very, very hard. Now, wall thickness really matters. So something to think about is there are your average wall thicknesses as you look around the shop where your stuff is, where you get at your local brick and mortar. You're going to look around and you're going to see a pretty consistent average, right? And that will vary with different manufacturers and different regions that they may come from. But the one thing that you're going to notice is the thicker the walls, the pipe is going to be heavier, but you're going to feel less heat in your hand. Now, if you're using that heat in your hand to gauge your smoking experience, as some gentlemen I know do, then you're going to want a thinner walled pipe. Perhaps you like to clinch and you want it lighter and more delicate, and all of that is fine. But I myself benefit from a thicker wall. I tend to smoke hot. I tend to smoke a little faster than I probably should. I have this habit of wanting to drink it in. And that is not advised, not even by me. Do as I say, not as I do, I guess. It is beneficial in almost every case to have a thicker wall, though. One, it also allows your pipe to be a little more forgiving over time. With the thicker walls, the briar does inevitably slowly start to burn. Especially if you're mistreating it, whether on purpose or by accident, eventually that will happen. And as you ream things back and as the pipe ages, a thicker wall will benefit towards a longer lasting pipe. It just will. If you have a thinner wall and you overheat that pipe, or you're caught out in the wind or whatever, it's going to become really easy to burn a hole through the side of that pipe. And that is something I have never witnessed myself, but I have heard folks reminisce about it, and it just sounds like a crushing self-defeat. And I wouldn't want that for anybody. But that's most of the design aspects that I was planning on talking about here. There's any number of shapes. There's every combination of shapes and aspects to make a new shape. Different things people have tried. Materials change things too. Falcons, radiators, even the new Vulture pipe. These have metal airways. These will create more condensation. As they create more condensation, you're going to have moisture buildup. That's something you have to manage. However, the benefit there is that's moisture that is not entering your mouth. That is less tongue bite for you, and it almost guarantees a smoother, wide open draw because there is a secondary chamber on that style of pipe for the loose leaves to catch or to fall down to, for any kind of hot embers to go there before they hit you. That is one benefit to those engineered system pipes. Peterson has a system pipe. Those are different systems than what I'm referring to when I say system pipe. But that is something to think about. I think all three of those system pipes I mentioned, the Viking, or not the Viking, that's no longer made. You can get bowls for them though. But the Viking, the Falcon, and the Radiator, the Hector Weeb Radiator. I'm a giant fan of the Radiator, and the Vulture pipe that was recently released does Falcon bowls, it does Radiator bowls, it does Viking bowls, it does all three with very little issue. And that will also add to your experience. So looking at the engineering of a pipe can change your experience. And that is just something to think about as you go through this journey with this hobby, is to have the experience the way you want to have it. And I don't know, I'm really hoping that this makes sense. If it doesn't, I don't know what to say. I'm doing my best, but I hope you guys are having a great day. I have inevitably given an end to the chair, and I will try and make another one soon. Bye.